He had everything: power, wealth, respect. To the world, he was untouchable. But all it took was one quiet moment in a small diner to unravel the illusion. A black waitress, invisible to most, stepped forward with an act so simple, yet so profound, that it shook the very foundation of his life. In a room filled with judgmental stares, her choice would expose not just his blind spots, but society's too. What happened that morning wasn't just a meal, it was a lesson. The question is, will we finally listen? The city moved at its usual relentless pace, but inside the quiet corner of a small diner, life felt slower, almost suspended. The scent of brewed coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the warmth of buttered toast and sizzling eggs. It was the kind of place people overlooked. Ordinary, unremarkable, but comforting to those who knew it. At the heart of this routine stood Alicia, a black waitress who had worked here for years. Every morning she tied her apron with steady hands, ready to face long shifts filled with familiar faces. To her, it wasn't just a job. It was survival, a way to support her family, to keep moving forward despite the quiet weight of judgment she often felt pressing against her skin. She smiled at customers, refilled cups without complaint, and carried the kind of strength only those who endure quietly can understand. Most people barely noticed her beyond the plates she served. To them, she was background, someone who blended into the hum of clinking glasses and muted conversations. Yet, beneath her calm exterior lived a resilience forged by years of being underestimated, overlooked, and, at times, dismissed. On this particular morning, as she wiped down tables and prepared for the day ahead, she couldn't have known that her routine was about to be interrupted. A man with wealth, status, and influence far beyond her world was about to step through those doors. He would enter the diner expecting nothing more than a quick breakfast with his son. But within these walls, where Alicia had quietly given so much of herself, a single moment of compassion would unfold, one that would challenge power, shift perspectives, and ripple far beyond the walls of this little diner. The bell above the diner door jingled, and the air seemed to shift. Conversations quieted for just a moment as a tall man in an immaculate suit entered, his presence filling the small space with an aura of wealth and power. Behind him trailed a boy, frail, uneasy, his hands fidgeting with the edge of his jacket. The man walked with confidence, but his son's timid steps betrayed a different story. Alicia barely paused. She had served all types before, and to her, every customer deserved the same patience. Still, she couldn't ignore the sudden hush, the curious glances that followed the billionaire and his son to their booth. It wasn't admiration that lingered in those eyes. It was something colder, subtle, unspoken, but sharp. Some customers seemed to wonder why a man of such status had wandered into this diner. Others looked at Alicia as though her presence near his table was almost offensive. Carrying her notepad, she approached their booth. The boy kept his eyes down, avoiding the world around him. The billionaire gave a brisk order, his voice smooth and commanding, as if he was used to being obeyed. Alicia scribbled it down quickly, but she noticed something. The way the boy's fingers tapped rhythmically against the table, the tension in his small shoulders. She recognized the signs: patience, discomfort, perhaps a world that rarely understood him. When she returned with their food, the whispers grew louder. Two men at the counter chuckled under their breath. A woman in pearls leaned close to her friend, muttering just loud enough, "Look at her, acting like she belongs there." Alicia felt the words burn against her back, but she kept her head high. She set down the plates gently, offering the boy a soft smile he didn't return. The billionaire's phone rang. He excused himself briskly, sliding out of the booth, his voice already sharp with business demands. The boy was left alone, staring at the plate before him, his movements tense and hesitant. He lifted his fork, then dropped it, his breathing shallow. Alicia's heart tugged. She had seen this before. children overwhelmed, their needs overlooked in the noise of the world. The whispers from the counter didn't stop. One man muttered something harsher this time, about people knowing their place. Alicia's grip on the tray tightened, but instead of reacting, she stepped closer to the boy. She bent down, her voice low and steady, guiding him through a simple rhythm. One bite at a time, one small step toward calm. The boy responded, not with words, but with a slow relaxation in his shoulders, a flicker of relief passing across his face. It was such a small act, almost invisible. Yet in that moment, the diners seemed to watch. Some with confusion, some with disdain, and a few with quiet awe. When the billionaire turned back toward the booth, still mid-conversation, he stopped in his tracks. His eyes fell on Alicia, gently helping his son eat, her patience transforming what had been a silent struggle into a moment of comfort. For the first time, the man's polished composure cracked, and with it, the entire room's assumptions were about to be tested. The diner seemed to freeze as the billionaire stopped mid-step, his phone sliding slowly from his ear, his gaze locked onto the sight before him. His son, calm for the first time all morning, carefully lifting food to his mouth, while Alicia guided him with quiet patience. But the hush in the room wasn't reverence. It was judgment. A voice broke through the silence, dripping with contempt. A billionaire's child being fed by a waitress? How pathetic. The words hung heavy, igniting murmurs and laughter from a few corners of the diner. Alicia felt every eye on her, the weight of centuries of prejudice pressing down in that moment. Her hands trembled, not from shame, but from the sting of being ridiculed for offering kindness. She wanted to retreat, to shrink into the shadows like she had so many times before. But the boy's fragile trust held her in place. His eyes, uncertain yet hopeful, clung to her as if she were the only anchor in a storm. The billionaire's jaw tightened. He could have ignored it. He could have gathered his son, paid the bill, and left without a word. But something in the way Alicia knelt beside his child, unshaken in her quiet dignity, forced him to see what the others refused to. For the first time, his empire of wealth and status meant nothing compared to this moment, this act of humanity. The diner's judgmental whispers grew sharper, each one slicing through the silence like a blade. But then, a sound broke through. The billionaire's son, letting out a soft laugh. It was small, fleeting, but it shattered the tension like glass. All eyes snapped back to the booth, and in that fragile laugh, the billionaire saw something he hadn't heard in years. His son's voice of joy. The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't Alicia who felt exposed. It was everyone else. The billionaire stood motionless, his eyes locked on the waitress who had done more for his son in a few minutes than all his wealth and power ever could. The diner's cruel whispers, once sharp and cutting, now seemed hollow against the truth unfolding before them. Slowly, he returned to the booth, slipping the phone into his pocket. For the first time in years, he didn't look like the untouchable titan of industry. He looked like a father, humbled by the kindness of a stranger. He watched as Alicia continued her quiet guidance, patient and unwavering, her presence soothing the boy into a rhythm of calm. The judgmental stares around them began to fade. Some lowered their eyes in shame, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. In that small diner, something had changed, if only for a moment. A black waitress, dismissed by many as invisible, had shown the undeniable power of humanity in the face of prejudice. When the meal ended, the billionaire didn't leave a large tip or a grand gesture. Instead, he offered something rarer: acknowledgement. He looked Alicia in the eye, not as a server, not as someone beneath him, but as an equal. "Thank you," he said, his voice heavy with sincerity. For Alicia, it wasn't wealth or recognition she sought. It was respect, and in that moment, she had claimed it. Not just for herself, but for every unseen, unheard person who had ever carried the burden of being underestimated because of the color of their skin. But outside that diner, beyond those walls, the story doesn't end. It echoes in workplaces, schools, and streets, where judgment and injustice still linger. Alicia's story is one of countless others, acts of dignity and resilience that too often go unnoticed. So, the question remains, how many moments like this will it take before we see each other not for race or status, but for our shared humanity?